Welcome to the Concord Prison Outreach podcast number 6. In today's title, we're focusing on a project entitled Naming the Unnamed. I'd love to first just thank the Minuteman Media Network for hosting this podcast. Minuteman Media Network serves the town of Concord, Carlisle, and the Middlesex County. My name is Sam Williams. I'm the Executive Director of Concord Prison Outreach, and I'm here today with 3 wonderful guests who will share some insights about this project and really give us some inspiration around why it's important. So I'll begin by having them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Liz Rust. I'm involved with Concord Prison Outreach on the board, and I've been working on this project for some number of years from the beginning.
And my name is Patty Roos, and I am also on the board and have been involved with this really special project, naming the unnamed, since we first started.
And my name's Ellie DeMaro. I'm the volunteer and program manager for Concord Prison Outreach, and I've also been involved with the project since its inception.
So just as a short overview, the project began in 2022, and it was Patty, who is one of our guests, her vision to have us really look at the Concord Prison Cemetery as it relates to the 218 men that were buried there. And it was from that investigation that we brought in Liz Ross, Ellie, who's also a part of the CPO team, to really envision how we can bring the voices, the lives, the backgrounds, and the stories of the men who were buried there. And so that's kind of like the backdrop and why it's called Naming the Unnamed. And so I'd love to just start by asking each of you all the first question. And it is, what first attracted you to get involved in this project? And what have you learned from it from your experience? So either one of you all can go.
I'll start. Sure. So I'm Liz Rust, and so I got involved with this project right from the beginning. I think Sam had just started at CPO, and I can remember sitting in, it was sweltering. It was mid-August, and it was so hot, and we were in his car talking to one of our CPO network folks, and he had come up with this idea of naming the unnamed. And I remember him saying, "What is that all about?" And we were talking about how exciting it was. I lived just up the street from the cemetery and never really noticed it. And once it was opened up to me to see those markers in the ground with just the numbers, it was like it pulled me into the project. And really, I'm still in, I have to say. And I've been in for 3 years. So I've learned a huge amount. One, I've learned how involved the whole community has gotten, and what it's sparked a lot of curiosity and interest from so many areas that we talked to. Everyone we talked to encouraged us to continue. This isn't our mission central aspect of what we do at Concord Prison Outreach, which is really doing education inside the prisons. But we were encouraged at every turn to continue on this project, and then also learned about what happens when people die in prison with no family, and just how sobering that is at all levels. And so to uncover and bring the lives of the men there with their names and bring that forward has been incredibly meaningful for me.
Thank you, Liz.
I think it's so interesting, Liz, that you say that you didn't really notice the prison cemetery. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like for myself, I grew up in Concord, and it was always there to see that big cross. It's 7 feet tall, right? Huge cross up on the hillside. And even as a kid, we would drive by on Route 2, and it was like, ooh, what's that? And I knew it was a cemetery that was affiliated with the Concord Reformatory. And so I remember it from forever. But what really, I guess, got me started with this was working as the physician for the incarcerated men at the MCI Concord facility. I worked as the medical director and provided clinical care to all of our incarcerated men at the Northeast Correctional Center, which is the Concord Farm, as well as MCI Concord, which is the medium security men's prison. And while I was there, I did go on a tour of the grounds and was really struck by what a unique place this is. You know, because you go up the hill and you see all these stones with just numbers. And it really got me thinking about who are these people and why are they buried there without any names or dates. And then in 2021 that I started to realize that the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail was going to go right by the prison cemetery. And that seemed like, a real meeting of the stars, that those things would happen and would allow us to bring this historic cemetery to the public. So that's kind of where I began with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so when I first started working at Concord Prison Outreach, one of my first meetings with anyone really was with Lisa Kennedy from the Mass College of Art and Design, and she had been working with classes at that school. They would partner with local nonprofits and kind of figure out ways that they could collaborate, whether it be fundraisers, art galleries, things like that. So my initial meeting with Lisa Kennedy, we had a lot of great ideas, but we wanted to bring Sam into the conversation to kind of see if there were other avenues to explore for, a possible way that we could collaborate with art students from Mass Art. And that's when Sam mentioned the Concord Reformatory Cemetery and that, this really unique idea to kind of create memorial illustrations for each of the people there. And for me, what drew me to the project in particular was that there would be, some sort of level of historical research that was necessary. And at the time, we didn't really know what that would look like because we were working with art students who, their, central focus in school is creating art, but they all seemed very interested in telling the stories in a respectful way. But I don't think we ever really imagined how much the historical research would really take off on its own. But I just, for me in particular, the historical aspect of it seemed like a really integral part of the memorial illustrations because that would kind of inform the students of how to kind of articulate the lives of these people and kind of tell more of a story than just numbers on a stone. So that was really interesting to me. And it's, from what you've heard, there's a lot of moving parts of the story. And I think it's been really beautiful to see how intentional each part of the story has been. And for the, the illustrations themselves, beyond the actual biographies, they also tell a story that we hope has done justice to telling the stories of those who are buried there, but also kind of be a gateway into the past and kind of telling part of the history of Concord and also kind of the history of mass incarceration and the realities of being incarcerated in the United States, and also kind of what that can tell us about what Concord is like now and what incarceration looks like in present day, and kind of trace back the roots of some of the history of incarceration and what's changed and what hasn't changed. So that was really interesting to me, and it's been really beautiful to see it evolve over time.
So my next question is about community impact. And when Patty first came to me and asked me about the project, one of my biggest challenge was because I was new to the community of Concord, I knew to move the project forward, we had to get buy-in from Concord residents. And I didn't know how that would happen in the most powerful way. We got Liz Russ involved, and as she mentioned earlier, she lives right down the street from Concord. And so from there, the project just continued to grow. And so the question is, how would you describe the community impact of this project and its importance to the town of Concord?
This project comes at a perfect time, or not perfect time, but is really at the convergence of the closing of MCI Concord of just last year, and also the Concord 250, which celebrates the history of Concord. So those two events, if you will, have really heightened and brought the focus of this project forward in their own kind of momentum. Concord's very proud of its cemeteries. There's the cemetery committee and Sleepy Hollow and the Author's Way, and people come from all over to visit Concord cemeteries. And bringing this forward into the light reinforces that this is part of history too. This is also one of Concord's cemeteries. And we embrace our total history, not just the parts of the history that we favor more, we think that puts us in a better light, but our history is all of this, including the prison and including this cemetery. So I think that we have done a lot to bring that forward and reinforce the prison through the cemetery as part of Concord's history in this particular way.
Thank you.
Yeah, Liz, I like what you said about history. And I think that's really true that Concord is a very historic place. But I guess for me, I think about community impact and I think about the future. And I think about what you said, Ellie, about awareness in our community about the lives of those folks who are incarcerated, as well as all of the people that are working in our prisons. You know, Concord is right at the epicenter of some of the state facilities, but we're also very close to the federal prison. There's the Middlesex County Jail area. And so we are part of a community which includes a lot of prisons. And I think it's so helpful, and I think it's so timely to have a place like the cemetery which can bring just regular people, Concordians, people from Acton, people from Harvard, who are using the rail trail to come up to this beautiful site and see something really special and something very curious, which is, you know, why are these men buried here since 1878? 218 men are there with just numbers. And I think that that's a really interesting question to ask our community here in Concord and in the greater Concord area, what that means and what that says about our criminal justice system. And I think that's what you were sort of getting at.
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely. And I think for me, something that I've kind of been a sentiment that I've seen throughout my time at Concord Prison Outreach is an interest from the community to engage with the incarcerated population, be a support system as a community to them. But if they're not able to go inside the prisons and on a volunteer basis, kind of thinking of ways that they can engage with the incarcerated population. And I think having these kind of more interactive means of engaging with the incarcerated population, even if it's not directly, can be, a way for people to learn a little bit more about the prison history, and also, think a little bit more about kind of what this means for the history of Concord, and a little bit more about, thinking a little bit thinking more critically kind of about what incarceration looks like today, and kind of be a way to explore mass incarceration and also Concord's history without, directly going inside the prison. So I think that's been really exciting for people. They've been very interested in that aspect of Concord, but having a way to kind of engage with it that's more accessible for people. I think, they've been wanting some sort of some sort of avenue like this to pursue that, but, having, the interactive panel and things like that, that's been a great way for people to kind of engage more, more in the history of Concord and also with the incarcerated population.
Thank you. So this next question is going to be a little storytelling from each of us, right? And so it's describe a stage in the project that made you feel proud and excited to have gotten involved. And I'll just plug a little story in. So when we first began, it was both about public education, prison reform, but it was also, with the intention of trying to connect to the local schools and trying to connect to the young people. They will be the future Concordians. They will be the residents in the future. And so I had an opportunity to sit in a presentation last year with a group of students who was presenting at the end of their school year from the Fenn School. And Ellie was very instrumental in bringing together that partnership. And so for a portion of their spring last year, they learned about the cemetery. They did some research. They created their own website. They did flyering around the town of Concord and put up information about the cemetery. And I got to see them present to an audience of about 75 people at the Fenn School. And I was really, I was almost kind of moved to tears, because that was kind of like the vision for me, was to have this project not only be something that adults take interest in, but also, have young people start to understand the history of their community in more deeper ways. So that's my storytelling aspect of my experience. So anyone else, what's your proudest moment of any of the different stages of the project?
I've been involved in many parts of the project, but the physical improvements and the work we did on site, we did a lot. We were there a lot of time, and one for the community engagement and the partners, the DOC and the residents of the DOC. I just want to acknowledge them in a super serious way. The DOC facilities folks were always there with us and really supported us, and I think really wanted to lift this up. I think they have a pretty crummy job, actually. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of pressures, and managing all the facilities and the DOC. There's just a lot of stress there, and so this was, here we come, this nonprofit wanting to lift up and beautify this site, and I think we were a little bit of a breath of fresh air. I don't really know, but I'm just making that up. But anyway, they were really supportive with us, and we were with them a lot. So we cleared trees. We had someone came and they donated, and we brought out our chairs and we sat there and this branch over here or this tree. We had people restore the cross, and they came with their sandblasters and all that. We had someone come and even did radar underground to find out where people were actually buried, because we wanted to be sure about that. And we made some maps, so we had landscape architect people. And the residents over at the farm across the street were always maintaining the property. So whenever we would come, they would be there, and it would all be, all mowed down. And I'll just pause and say that there's a cemetery out in Rutland, and it's really disheveled. So people didn't maintain it. So we take for granted the decades and decades that this has been maintained, because it wouldn't take much to have it be overgrown, and then you would never see those stones. Actually, we lost a few. I actually went out there with a pickaxe one time, right? And I found it, and there was one I couldn't find, and they had to go find it. So I've enjoyed the actual physical aspect of it, and we're going to be doing a little bit more. We're doing a seating area coming up, and then we have a beautification project that's also in store. So I like the physical aspect of it, though there's many other parts of the project, but I've enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, that's great. And I see you out there with the pickaxe. So exciting.
Yeah.
For me, I have so many happy, really exciting moments that I'm so happy to share. And I'm going to have two. I know you said for one, but let me try to just do two. One of them was really at the very beginning, before I found Concord Prison Outreach. And when I realized about the proximity of the rail trail and the opportunities that looking at the cemetery and having it available to the Concord community and beyond, I called everybody I could think of, including the Department of Corrections, who has been incredibly, actually surprisingly helpful and supportive of this project, and the cemetery committee and the historical society and the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail people. And I took many people up to the cemetery, and it was quite cold and wintry at that time. And there was also fall when we were doing this. And what I really loved was so many people saw the magic in the place. Like they kind of thought, well, okay, so there's a cemetery. I guess that's important historically. But then when they went up on that hill, it was like they got it. It was like magic. It was like, this is really a special place. And it's not just historic. It is just meaningful in terms of raising up humanity, which is something that you like to talk about, Sam, and I love that. And I think that's a lot about Concord Prison Outreach. It's about raising humanity. The other thing that I have for a second kind of special moment is the first time that I went to the website and all that work was done. And you had reached out, and gotten all of this work done by the artists and by the school. And then Tim had done an incredible job with the mapping. And I went in there and I was like, wow. So if you haven't been on the website and gone to the interactive map, do it now, because it will give you so much joy to go and see all of this, like uncovering all this progress, the really interesting details about the lives of these men. And it's so exciting that this all just unfolded over the course of really not a lot of time, if I think about that. So anyway, those are my two moments. What about you, Ellie?
Yeah, no, I think to kind of continue on that sentiment of raising up humanity, I think for me, one of the most, I think, memorable, but also memorable points of this project was the first time I saw the illustrations from the students at the College of Mass Art. Because I think we had kind of a vision of some sort of personal memorial for each person. But the way that the students really connected these people's stories to, a physical representation of, their lives or just pieces of their history. I think, some of the illustrations are if they were,
I find a good one here.
If they were an artist or if they were a baker, they would, illustrate that. And then some of the other students that didn't have a lot of information about the individual, they would research their state flower. If they were born in a certain state, the memorial kind of incorporated that. Or, if they were part of a historical event, kind of incorporating that into their illustration. I think that kind of is a reminder of how connected we are to each other, not just, in your current community, but also to people who have come before us, even, people that I think can be othered, people who are marginalized and people who are incarcerated, and then, to be buried in a cemetery that's kind of off a beaten path, in these graves. I think the way that these students were able to connect to these folks, even with very little information, I think for me was a reminder of humanity and just kind of how, they did a beautiful job with the research, but even as, people who don't study historical research, as their primary focus, how they can still be so intentional and still so connected to the work they're doing and be able to connect to people that, are no longer living and also have been, kind of forgotten over time, and that even with little information, there was still, parts of these folks that they could, pick out centuries, decades later. That was a really powerful moment for me, and I think a reminder of humanity and kind of the purpose of the broader work we're doing at Concord Prison Outreach.
Thank you. And Ellie reminds me that as much as this project appears to be adult-centered, it is also heavily youth-centered, because as she mentioned, when we got the young people from the Mass College of Art to be involved, what they demonstrated was their talent, their creativity, and the vision that young people can share when you give them the space to share vision. So I have one more question, and specific to each of you, right? So, Patty, the question to you is about the future of the project and how would you describe the legacy?
So, I mean, I think this project has already been incredibly successful. And I see it continuing to grow in terms of exposure to the community. And I think as people hear about it, as people go to the website, they're going to realize what a special place this is. And so again, I come back to my feeling that the purpose of this project, well, it's not the purpose, but one of the main purposes of this project is to increase community awareness. And I feel like we've done that, and I feel like we're continuing to do that. And I just want people to go there and ask these questions. So much of the time, I think when we have projects, we explain something, like we tell people the answers about what's going on. And I feel like with this project, it's really special and different because I think it asks questions. It's not just lecturing somebody about like, oh, these people were here and they were men who died in Concord prison, at the Rutland camp, at the Middlesex County Jail, and it asks about like who were they and why were they there and why didn't their family come and get their body and what are we doing today, in 2025 in our prison system. So anyway, I think the legacy is to continue asking these questions to a wider and wider audience.
Thank you. And so, Ellie, you mentioned working with the Mass College of the Art, and you've been involved with a lot of the nuts and bolts, right? So it'd be awesome to tell us a little bit more about some of the research that went on and the assembly of the book. And Patty mentioned the website. So, you were very involved in a lot of the nuts and bolts.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd say the research went through many different stages just because it's such a large number of people. And for each person, there's a lot of, individual research that has to go on, vital records, birth certificates, death certificates, lining up names. We started with kind of a list that was, I think, sourced from Find a Grave and then also from the Department of Correction. They kept a handwritten log of the names and, reading cursive from decades ago, sometimes it can get a little lost in translation. So we started with this rough list of names and kind of rough dates of when these folks may have died, when they were born. For some people, we only had the century they were born in. And so the college, the students from the Mass College of Art started to do more in-depth research on each person, kind of uncovering some more of the basic biographical information, and when possible, a little bit more about their lives. There were some people who, if they had, their military records, they might describe like a tattoo they had. And so that was kind of like the very organic start of the research. And then Allison Newey and Tommy Worrall joined the Concord Prison Outreach team as historical research interns. And then they really began sourcing more of the records and doing some more confirmation of names and compiling them into the biographies. And so that's where the biographies also started to form. And over time, there's just been more and more players, Jim Sherblum from, a local historian, Joe Palumbo. There's been a lot of different, stakeholders in Concord history that have been able to lend their wisdom and knowledge to help put together the biographies. I know Liz, John Finneran was kind of a main source of focus for you, just because I think for a lot of people that have been involved in the project, there might be a particular story that they feel drawn to, or that is, particularly interesting in terms of the fact that, they were affected by some sort of major event, or they were part of, if they were incarcerated at a certain facility. I know that was kind of a point of interest for a lot of people. So the research really started to come together over time, and thankfully, through a lot of that meticulous research, we were able to put together kind of snapshots of each of these people And for the veterans in particular, we really built out the biographies a little bit more because veterans in Massachusetts should be formally recognized. They should have a flag at their grave. So we wanted to do a little bit more research into them specifically to make sure that they get, I guess in a way, their justice of being able to be formally recognized. I know there's local veteran groups that do that process. So to be able to lend a hand, I guess, in honoring those folks. And so that's why we're really excited about the event that's coming up, but I'll let Liz get into that. But like I said, we're putting together the biographies and then also incorporating them into the illustrations that the Mass College of Art students put together. And this book has kind of gone through also its own evolution as we find out new information, realize the spelling of a name was an A and not an O. There's been a lot of revisions of this book, but we're really proud of the final product, which is each person buried has their own page with their biography included, and then also their personal memorial illustration. So it's been really cool to not only have a archive of these people, their biographical information on paper, but also to have a tangible piece of artwork that's in the form of a book. We also have our artwork panels that have been on display. And then now the interpretive panel, which is another way for people to directly engage with the cemetery. And then we've also been able, through working with Tim, our website expert, he helped us kind of map out the cemetery on our website. And then that way people can also interact with it online, which Patty said, check it out, as soon as you can. It has all the information compiled in one place, and we hope it's another way that people can engage with this work and their stories. And so it's been a really beautiful evolution of an idea that we had of possibly doing illustrations to now all of these moving parts that are a website, a book, an interpretive panel, the events that we've been able to do in the public and engage with different community partners has been really exciting.
And so, Liz, you've been involved in every aspect of the project, right? Ellie mentioned the event that's coming up. Can you talk about that and hidden treasures and the support from the Freedom Way and what else is next?
Sure. So I just wanted to mention on the book that Ellie mentioned, we also have note cards that we made of these, and these items are for sale if you're interested in that. So just contact us, concordprisonoutreach.org. So we have, the cemetery is right on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and right across the cemetery on the trail is the Giroux Pavilion. And we had an event there last year, which was the naming dedication, and we read the names of all the people buried there. And I should have said that as one of my real meaningful events. It was very powerful, and it's a great space, and it's a great space for us because it's right there by the cemetery. So we're going to have another event there for the veterans. To honor and lift up the veterans, and it's called Honoring the Patriots of the Concord Reformatory Prison Cemetery. Everyone bringing lives forward, and everyone has a story, right? We're talking about the stories of the men buried there. And this is sponsored by the Freedom's Way, and they're a regional organization that lifts up cultural events and cultural activities in this area. And their month of May is Hidden Treasures. And if you go to their website, it must be freedomsway.org, I guess, or something, there's many activities. And so this is Sunday, May 18th, just right before Memorial Day, a week before, from 2 to 4 at the Giroux Pavilion. It's an accessible event, and there's some parking there, and then there's parking nearby at the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And I'm sure the weather will be beautiful like it is today, and we will be lifting up and telling the stories of the veterans buried there. And coming up, and I mentioned this before, we're working with the town to build out a contemplative seating area with an interpretive panel that we've just completed, which is very exciting. And then we're going to embark on a beautification project. Every cemetery, there's always lots of flowers and bushes and this, and we thought that that would be our crowning task, sub-project, if you will, for here at the cemetery. And that's our plan for this year. And we're so interested in interest from the community and support for the community in any which way. Come to our events, support us with your donations, support us with your time and interest. We love to engage with people on this project.
And so before we close up, I want to see if each of you can just give us your final thoughts. We'll start with Ellie and then we'll come this way.
Well, I'll say that like I said, I personally, I studied history in college, and historical research has always been an interest of mine. So it's been really exciting to be able to engage with this project in particular, and also have it be connected to our broader mission. Even though a lot of our work really takes place inside of the prisons, it's been really powerful to see how a project like this can be a story of incarceration just through the retelling of history, which I think has been, Sam mentioned the students, they were able to kind of articulate in their own way, what their stories mean. And I think that's been a really wonderful and a wonderful, thing for me in particular, is that history can be a way to learn about the past, but also be a connection to humanity, and be a way for people to engage with stories that maybe they feel disconnected to, or, things that they don't understand, like, the way that incarceration works in the United States. And it can be a way to inform people of the past, but also be a way to connect in the future, and a reminder of how, we can be better community members, better people. And so that's been really cool for me. And I'm just really thankful to be part of it and to work with a lot of wonderful people that have been so deeply connected to it in a way that I think really comes from these type of organic, brainstorming ideas, and how they transform over time has really been just amazing to be a part of.
I love what you said about history. And I wanted to say that just today I was looking at the interactive site, and I started thinking about 1918, which was the Spanish flu, which we don't call the Spanish flu because it's not from Spain, but it's an influenza A epidemic, which was pandemic, which was a huge part of history in that era. And there were actually 7 men who were buried in their, youth, really, 20s, 30s. One guy was 44, so 7 in October of 2018. And I didn't know that until I was playing with the map today. And there's just so much interesting stuff that is in the website, in the book, such a lot of wonderful research. And really the only thing that I want to say in my last thoughts is thank you. And that's thank you to the 3 of you here who have brought this incredible concept to life. I mean, especially the 2 of you who saw from the very beginning that this is just like a bountiful treasure to be discovered, and did such an incredible job of bringing it to life. And of course, there are so many others. We talked about the folks at the school, at the Mass College of Art, folks at the Concord Library, folks at Department of Corrections, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So many people have come together, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Patty. That's very heartfelt. I did want to mention also the Department of Transportation. We had to get approval from them. And the person I worked with there, she loved the project. And she would always ask, like, well, tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more. So I think that, in the end, in, let's say, a decade from now or some future time, what will be left in this area in the prison? There'll be a couple of houses, and then there'll be the cemetery. And I think we've been able to create something that lasts, that will be a permanent part of Concord's history. And we're working now to try to bring that forward into the MCI Concord redevelopment vision to make sure that this history and this doesn't get lost.
So in closing, I want to thank each of you. Patty, earlier you talked about magic, and you all have been very intentional and very strategic in allowing and helping this project to be magical. You also talked about that this isn't just a historical project. This project is about raising awareness and consciousness of humanity. So want to say thank you all again for coming, and want to also thank the Minuteman Media Network for hosting this event, all your support that you contribute to and have contributed to the project. You can check us out at ConcordPrisonOutreach.org, which is our website, and stay tuned for podcast number 7. Thank you.